Hello and welcome to the Eternal ROI Podcast. My name is Chris Patton. I am the CEO of His Way at Work. And today we have a guest that is going to give us some tremendous insight on hiring and maintaining or keeping good people that are also competent. And we talked last episode with the owner or president of the company, C.H. Hanson. Phil Hanson is his name, and he gave us some tremendous insight as to his challenges in certain situations in this related to business. So today we're going to speak with Beth Mackin. Beth has been at C.H. Hanson for 9 years now, over 9 years. She is the director of HR and EDI, which is specific to the business area, and I'll let her explain that here in a minute. But Beth has tremendous experience. She's, like I said, been there 9 years. They've been on the His Way at Work system for just over 4 years. So she's kind of seen both sides of that at Hanson, and we're going to bring her in. Beth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, Chris.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time. This is, I think this is going to be helpful. As you and I spoke beforehand, this is an opportunity for those listening, not just to hear about a challenging situation from a president of a company of fifth, or actually he's fourth generation in that business, but also to hear a perspective from a leader in the same company as they've watched from a distance. What does that look like, and what are some things you observed? So we'll dig into that in a few minutes, but let's start with a little bit about your role at C.H. Hanson. So tell us a little bit about the director of HR and the EDI. And you mentioned at the very beginning of our conversation a few minutes ago that you actually started in a part-time role that was supposed to be super stress-free, right?
Correct. I started a little over almost 9 years ago as a part-time purchasing assistant, helping the purchasing manager a couple days a week, not full-time, low stress. And shortly after I started, maybe about 3 or 4 months, they realized I had a little more experience than they had anticipated and moved into the EDI role. So that's electronic orders that we get from all of our big customers. So at that time, I managed all the day-to-day orders, bringing them over and managing them. And then I moved into the director of EDI role. So I managed all of the mapping and programming for that. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, as we grew, when I first started at Hanson, we had about a little under 50 employees. Now we're almost 100. So a few years ago, they realized that they needed a full-time HR person. And Phil approached me and felt that I was the best person for the role, which I appreciated the opportunity. I'd never really done HR before, but I had worked with all the different departments in my roles, and he felt like I would, be a good fit. So I did take on the opportunity. So now I manage all the HR and EDI for the company.
So not quite a part-time gig, right?
Not a part-time and no longer stress-free, but it's been a great opportunity.
Well, I can tell you, and I said this earlier too, but I'll say it on the show as well. I've heard your name for years. I've heard such great things about the impact you're having there at C.H. Hanson. So I know this is this is a big deal, and I appreciate you taking the time to share with us. So you said just coming up on 9 years, so truly His Way at Work came into C.H. Hanson roughly halfway through your tenure, somewhere around 4.5 years ago.
Correct.
If you can remember back to that point in time, what were you thinking initially as Phil says, hey, these crazies are coming in and they're going to help us put some systems in place or help deepen the culture, basically? Give me a sense of what you thought going into that.
Well, I was excited about the opportunity. I know since I, started with Hanson 9 years ago, they always talked about our culture and our, family-owned business. So the family-owned business feel. So I was excited, just hoping that this would bring a little more structure. I know, being a family-owned business, a lot of people wear lots of hats. Mm-hmm. So Phil and Andrew and Craig were taking on that role of, caring for people. And so I thought, it's a great opportunity for me to make it a little more structured. We kind of did things just nilly-willy and just like, hey, we'll help this person. Okay, we won't help this person, or we'll try to do this. And so make it a little more formal and consistent, I guess.
Very cool. So fast forward the next 4+ years, looking back at this point, one, do you feel like that was successful? And then two, what are some ripple effects of impact in the company from that implementation?
Yeah, I think this program has really helped us structure our caring and obviously be more consistent, just making sure that we are handling each need in the same manner. So there's no one feeling like we're not, helping them out because of a certain reason. So I think that has really helped. It also has solidified our culture, because one of our core values is serving others and getting it done. So I think this has helped, our company fill out one of those core values that we are here to serve others, which we consider our customers, our employees, and also our community. And so the Hansons have always been big on giving back to the community. And so this has also been the avenue for us to give back to the community and structure. And it's been super successful. In the beginning, there were growing pains. We have a team of 5 that represent the areas in the company, so that everybody has a voice. And so it was, we had some growing pains of just making sure that it's structured and that those people were, meeting the needs in the proper way. But we've had some really great success stories with it.
That's fantastic. So the challenge that we want to talk about today, that most of the business people I'm talking to it's in their top 3. It may not be every business owner or every business leader's top challenge, but it's certainly in the top 3, is finding and keeping good people, good character people, and competent people, those that are both, right? And so there's just seems to be clearly a shortage of people that want to work, shortage of people that are good, one at their jobs, but also good in character. And therefore, the companies are struggling to find those people. So I know, speaking with Phil, he's like, listen, it's no different for us. We certainly struggle as well. But he also mentioned some ways that you guys are trying to be resourceful and minimize the challenge to the company. So share with us from your perspective, Beth, what does the caring culture at C.H. Hanson, how do you guys look at this a little differently, and how are you approaching this idea of hiring and finding good people that are competent?
Yeah, I mean, like everyone, we're also struggling with hiring and retaining our employees. So we look at, our His Way at Work program, our caring program, as, an added benefit per se. A lot of people, especially the younger generation, when you interview them, that they talk about, how do you give back? And this is, a great tool. Now we can say we have like concrete data saying, yes, we do give back. We give back to the employees in these manners. We do give back to the community, and, let them know the programs that we offer. And every time since, the last year or so, people are like dumbfounded, like, wow, you guys do a lot for the community and your employees. So I think that's we talk about that in our interviews now of the program and how it's affected our employees and our community. And we've also tried to tap new sources for hiring. We worked with a company called Autism Workforce. So now we have 2 autistic gentlemen that work for the company. So we're trying to find alternative sources than just the regular sources, maybe working with the retired military. We work with our local colleges for apprenticeships and education for our employees. So we're trying to find really alternative sources besides the normal, avenue, because sometimes you just tap out the normal avenue and there's just no good candidates out there. So you're like, okay, where do I go next? So also, talking with my peers and seeing what they're doing, but the various programs that we've used have been really successful.
Where do you find those peers, Beth?
I am a member of SHRM.
Okay.
So I have, and then my local SHRM. So I have contacts through them. They have, they do like once a month meetings, or I've done their mentorship program as well. So, that, and then just, people that I've met over the last few years that are in
Sure.
HR.
That's good. So when you mentioned dumbfounded candidates in interview process where they're asking, how do you give back, or you're telling them up front, one of the things I love about what you guys do and what we promote is not just giving out into the community. And a lot of our business people we talk to initially will say, we're doing quite a bit. We're giving into this organization and this organization, which are good things, right? But we often do that while overlooking the very employees in our company, thinking, well, I'm paying a fair wage, that should be enough, but it's just not. And it doesn't drive the culture like we want. So when you're telling these employees or these candidates that you're giving back, here's what we do for employees and what we do for the community, we're trying to cover all of it, and they're dumbfounded. What's interesting to me is that's one of the ways you guys are drawing a good culture fit, because typically that's not going to light up somebody's eyes that doesn't have the good culture fit, the good character. It's going to be so what? What are you going to do for me personally, right? I'm not going to need all the help those other people need. I don't care about the community. So how much can I make? Those kind of things. When you share these other things, you're going to see recognition or someone who resonates with what you're doing. That's an indicator of a good culture fit, right?
Right.
So
So what's interesting is when we first started His Way at Work, you do that caring matrix, and we noted that 80% of our funds or our resources were going towards community stuff, and they were like, that really needs to be the opposite. So since then, we've really structured our caring team to focus more on our employees, because we feel like if we're not taking care of our own, how can we take care of everyone else? So we have actually turned that around. We're now at more 80% towards our employees and 20% of the community, even though obviously our community is very important to us. I've seen that, and we've changed our interview structure. We talk. We have our core values, and I have a set of questions that I ask for each core value to see, to really get an idea of, will they fit our culture. And then we just recently, I'm not sure if Phil has talked about this, I started working with Culture Index Survey. So we have all of our candidates complete the survey, and it really tells you about that person and, their way of thinking, decision making, their heart. And it helps us. It's not the be all end all. We don't just hire based on that, but it's another tool that we can say, oh, wow, we really think this person would fit. And then we do this culture index survey to see, where they fit. And then we had all of our current employees do it. So we know where they're at and how we can best serve them, how we can best manage them. So that has been a really great tool. We just started using it. So I'm eager to see how this will be an additional helpful tool when we're hiring.
That's fantastic. I'm going to come back to that in a little bit because I think that's going to be some relevant advice and some steps to take after we get through this next piece. So as you have seen challenges in finding and retaining good people that are also competent, and you're obviously taking some steps toward finding the cultural fit, you're kind of marketing to your interviewees, to your candidates, this caring culture you have, one for your employees and also for the community. I love that you've switched from the 80-20 going outward to 80-20 inward. Beautiful thing right there. But sometimes things change. Sometimes you get into a situation, and Phil described this to us in detail in the last episode, but you get in a situation where there's an employee that is highly competent in their job. They do good work. They know what they're doing. They know the job. They know the details. And probably, especially if they've been there a while, they know the ins and outs of the particular company that you're in, right? But for one reason or another, the culture fit is no longer there. Or maybe the culture changed. In some companies, Beth, the owner may come in or the president may come in and suddenly shift direction and go into this idea of a caring culture. But when the key leader here we're talking about was hired, it was a totally different culture. And so the culture shifted, but they have not changed. And they were a decent fit with the last culture, but now with this new picture, they're not. Or in some cases, the culture has been that way all along, but they shifted. They drifted away from it. So either way, you end up with somebody who's good at the job, good for the business part of the company, but culturally not a great fit. And Phil described a situation several years ago. I know you and I have talked, so you know what we're talking about here. And it's not about the names or position or anything, but it's just basically this concept of having a leader in place. And Phil's description was a key leader who had been with us for 20 plus years, who he considered a close friend that was doing a good job in the role he was in, but was a challenge to get along with. And Phil said maybe more than a challenge, probably more difficult than I realized for others, where it wasn't as difficult for me because we had a relationship that was different. One, potentially just because Phil's the president, but also I think they had a relationship beyond that. So as you watch this happen, I'd like to know and just share with the listeners, what were some thoughts leading up to, maybe in the year or two leading up to what eventually turned into a separation? What were your thoughts around why nothing's happening or what's going on with this individual and the lack of fit?
Yes. So I had, kind of had some conversations with Phil about that person, just saying, hey, I think there's an issue, we needed to address it and talk about it. And, each time you'd be like, okay, well that, that's just him, we have to, and I'm like, okay. And each time I'd be like, I really think you need to, talk about this, address this. And he'd be like, okay. So I think part of it, there were two things going to play in this. Obviously, this guy had been here a very long time. So it was like, well, that's just the way he is. We just have to learn to live with it. And also, that was shortly around the time I took over the director of HR role. So, the management had kind of taken on that role before that. And I think it was a little bit of hard to take that, release that control and be like, okay, I'm like, you hired me to do this job. Please let me do this job. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like, people would come to me with situations and I'd always be like, hey, my door's open. Come talk to me if you have any issues. And, I'll address them. And so then I addressed them, but nothing happened. And so they started feeling like, well, you're not going to do anything. So why come talk to me? And I felt like it was solidifying that I wasn't going to do anything, even though I was trying to, but I felt like my hands were tied. Yeah. So it was a little, heartbreaking because it was like, I want to do something. I want to make this company better. I want everybody to feel like they're, they want to work here, but then I'd bring up issues and nothing would be done about them, for various reasons. But in this situation, I felt like my hands were kind of tied. And, I tried to kept telling people, I'm working on it. And they're like, no, you're not. So it kind of, I guess not my reputation, but, like I felt like people were like, I'm not even going to come talk to you because you're not going to do anything about it.
Wow. Roughly how long did that happen before you saw action from Phil?
It was about a year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm assuming if you're feeling that, you're hearing people come to you and you're making efforts to relay this to Phil and to bring up the subject and even bring up some of the challenges, I'm assuming that others in leadership within the company are experiencing something at least similar.
Yeah, I would say they kind of saw the same things, like, why aren't we doing, at least addressing it? Maybe not necessarily making that move of separating, but at least addressing like, hey, we preached our culture. Everybody should feel comfortable. Everybody should be treated fairly. Everybody should this. And then, It's like, but on this case, we weren't. So in some cases we were, some cases we weren't. So I think there was like a little disconnect of like, well, how come some people can act like this and some people can't? So there was a little disconnect. And I think part of it was just the denial of like, no, he's not like that. He's not like that. And it's like, oh, are they telling the truth? Maybe they just don't like him. And maybe they just, they're just trying to make it difficult for him. Because again, he has been here a very long time. And there was a little bit in trepidation because he had been there so long. They were like, I don't want to make any waves. I don't want to, so some people didn't feel comfortable talking to me because they're like, he has more clout per se than I do. So they're like, oh, I don't want to bring this up. So,
yeah. So some of the obvious things going through my mind and I'm sure as yours as well as this was happening is, if we are a company who says this is our culture and this is how we want to operate, but there's inconsistency between what we say and what we do, then that inconsistency from an employee standpoint and from your role as a leader and other leaders in the company begins to be, all right, I know Phil. I know the leader. I know his character. I know what kind of person he is and what kind of leader he's been, and it's clearly fourth, fifth generation family business. It's successful. Yet, I'm not sure I can fully trust fill in the blank. I'm not sure I can fully trust that I'm going to have a job here in a year or two because while they're saying one thing, I'm seeing them do another in this certain situation. Or maybe I don't need to be as focused on this part of my role because, frankly, as long as I'm doing this well, I don't have to be held accountable for that because – well, he's not, right? So there's just so much lost potential for impact and momentum and unity when there's a disconnect between what we're saying that we do and then what we're actually doing. Did you see some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, and there were a lot of people in the company that felt that way. There was just, like I said, that disconnect of you say, you have to abide by our culture. Our culture is very big, but yet then you have maybe a person or two that is not following that. And, how I think in the last few years, we've been more intentional about making sure people fit with our culture, but we weren't in the past. And so it was a disconnect and we were trying to kind of steer the company in a different manner to make sure our culture was, more prominent, yet we just had a little resistance, in which you typically do when you first start something new. It's like you do have a little bit of resistance. So I think that little resistance was just a way to make it better. But yeah, there was a little resistance, and so it was felt throughout the company.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, as Phil, he shared with us his personal journey to finally coming to a place where he had to make a decision. And that first decision was to bring someone in from outside as an impartial judge, so to speak. He said investigator. But he recognized, because of my relationship with this individual, I'm not going to be able to be impartial. So he brought someone outside in. As you saw that action taken, what was your thought?
I was very pleased with it and very proud of Phil that he took that step, because I know it was very hard with him because he had been with us for so long and he really helped the company in so many ways that it was really hard. And Phil he really truly is an amazing man. He loves God and he's got a huge heart. And I think, maybe sometimes people play against that, knowing that he is like that. He's very, he is a man of his word. And I think for him to really realize, step back and go, okay, I have to take my personal feelings out of this and really see what is happening with the company. And making that move to say, hey, I'm going to have an impartial investigator. Because, I was too. I felt like, oh, yeah, he's doing this, but he's such a great guy. And so I think taking that personal side out of it and saying, hey, you investigate, you see what's really going on, and then we have to make a decision, and being bold enough to make that decision, even though maybe his heart wasn't feeling that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and he shared with that. And that's just if you haven't heard that episode already, I strongly recommend you go back to that because he just shared a very personal journey toward that decision. And the real decision was just bringing in the impartial investigator because Phil knew, let's go back to the character part. Phil knows you. Phil knows who Beth is and that Beth is going to shoot him straight. And he knew, though he didn't want to admit, that he had an issue and he needed to make a decision. So bringing in that impartial individual was actually the biggest decision because Phil, for the most part, knew what would happen after that. They would come back with a result that he could not ignore and would then have to make the separation. So it's a big deal for him. And I'm thankful to hear, because I know Phil, thankful to hear you can quickly say, this is a man of God. This is somebody who's imperfect, but certainly striving to do things the right way. And he said that. I'm not going to get it right every time. But to admit it, to go into that decision was incredible. So play the rest of that out, Beth, from your standpoint and from the standpoint of the other leaders in the company. What did that look like from your perspective and from theirs as he brought in the investigator, as that went on, and then he made that final termination decision?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, the areas where he was the leader, they were relieved that we actually made steps to do what we did. They were like, wow, they're really hearing us. They're understanding where we're coming from. And they're practicing what they preach. We say we want people of our culture and everybody to be treated fairly and serve others. And they've heard this for so long, but they weren't seeing it. So to actually see that we actually were making that steps, they were, there were many people that, came and thanked me. And I think it was literally, the tension just kind of, peeled away, not completely, because you always have a little bit of that, but It was like, wow, they really heard us and we appreciate that they took the steps.
That's fantastic. And, one of the things Phil said that's kind of funny, and I just love the truth of it, but he said, things didn't just instantly turn rosy and beautiful because, one, this individual was doing good work, doing a lot of work that suddenly I didn't have a replacement for. He had to make the decision prior to finding the right person to fill that role. And even that took, from what I understand, a couple of years before it fully played out. So it was a challenging time after that. From your perspective, the difficulty of kind of divvying out this individual's roles and different people taking on additional load, was that something they were begrudging about, or something they were willing to do because they knew this was the best path forward?
Yeah, I think they were willing to take on that. We had some key people really step up and realizing that was the best for the company. No one ever wants to take on, extra work, but I think realizing, and they knew the culture that was there when that person was there, and realizing that was not, that was not good and that was not the right fit. So they had been a part of that, and realizing, where that was, and just making that step. They're like, okay, we'll step up. Yeah, it took us a couple years to find the right person. We went through a couple more people that we thought may be a good fit, but weren't. And now I feel like we have, that person in place. But I think it was good growing pains that we needed to do. And it was, it was abrupt, and it was like, wow, okay, now what do we do? But everybody kind of pulled together and like, okay, let's do this. We can do it.
Yeah,
so it was a good challenge. But overall, I think it impacted, everybody there, because they're like, wow, even though it was a hard decision that had to be made, they'd made it. And, they were looking out for us, ultimately.
Yeah, that's strong. So you made a comment earlier I want to come back to at this point. that there are several things you've changed within the structure of your interview process, your ongoing survey process. Give us a sense. You mentioned the interview structure. You mentioned core value questions, culture index survey. Give us a sense of the various things that you guys at C.H. Hanson are doing now. Not that you will 100% eliminate situations like that, but you will avoid the vast majority of them, and certainly the bigger ones. What are some practical things you guys are doing now?
So I think, adding to our interview process about our core, we talk about our core values, what they mean to us, and that we want someone in here that is going to fit our culture. I mean, I think everybody company now says that that's the new buzzword, the culture. But we ask specific questions to kind of gain that information of like, are you someone that is going to serve others? Are you someone that is going to get it done? Are you someone that that will meet those core values? And then, like I said, recently we've added the culture index survey, which is another tool for us to see the type of person they are. Are they a good fit? Are they, if they need to be forward thinking, are they forward thinking? If they need to just be a craftsman, if they need to be various, whatever that role is, are they going to fit that role, so that we're not in 6 months going, oh man, that wasn't a good fit. I mean, you always have that. And then really, talking about our culture. Phil does, a quarterly meeting with everybody in the company, and we talk about, we continuously talk about our core values and our culture and how that fits. And then them seeing that we're actually, our big thing is, are you living out our core values? You may know them, you can recite them, but are you actually living them out? So just bringing to light of the things that we are doing, that everybody is living out that core values.
That's great. Anything that you're doing with core values after hire? Obviously Phil talking about them, continuous conversation. Any other places within the HR world that you've integrated those core values or other means? I know Phil mentioned the Net Promoter Survey you're doing for employees, right? Would you recommend this company as a good place to work? Is Correct. One good one, right? Where you see some hot spots, there may be a problem. Anything else you're doing after hire that's helping to keep that culture intact?
I think we've incorporated that kind of into our reviews as well. Like, not only are you doing the job, we want you to do the job, but are you meeting our core values? So that's part of our review process as well, is to see, are you doing the job that we expect you to do? Are you meeting our core values? And then just, I guess, the leadership living out the core values, because if they see us living out the core values, then they're more, in tune to live out them too. So if they see that we're now living out our core values, then it makes it.
That's great. So considering other people listening that may be in a position similar to yours, either in HR or in some leadership role, not at the top position in the company, but someone who speaks to that individual, is there any advice you could give them on how to do differently what you were trying to do with Phil along the way? Now, keep in mind, Phil's assessment of this was, she's telling me. It wasn't that I didn't hear it. I just wasn't willing to hear it. I wasn't willing to listen or to own it, because I knew doing so would require action that I wasn't prepared to do. So looking back at that, you can't fix him, but is there something you would have tried differently that you didn't do, or something you've learned since that might help in that situation?
I just think keeping consistent, and making maybe communicating it a little differently, so that he understood it, or maybe allowing him to witness, some of that or something, because, I guess just trying to be as consistent and keeping an open door policy. Like Phil has an open door policy, I have an open door policy. And then, if you are going to act, if you say you're going to act on it, act on it. Because if you don't, then you lose that credibility of like, well, I've told her that this is happening and no one's doing anything. I mean, you also have to, just because someone comes in doesn't necessarily mean that it's happening. You have to do your research, your investigation to make sure it's happening. But, and just being patient, I guess. I know, like I said, Phil's an amazing man, and I know he has a great heart, and I knew eventually he would get there. It was just being consistent of like, hey, Phil, let's talk about this, and not badgering him about it, but to say, hey, and bring it up as when there's instances like, hey, let's talk about it. And I knew, he would make the right decision, which he did.
That's so good, Beth. We've said it earlier, but it bears repeating here and just pausing on it. And that is a business owner or leader that claims a relationship with God, that attempts to live that out in the business, remains a man or a person, woman, man, doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. They are not suddenly gifted with perfection or remote proximity to perfection. So, as a leader that works with that individual, patience, trust, prayer for them, but acknowledging that, he's going to get there. And I'm not going to just throw my hands up and quit because I can't get him or her to listen to me and to take an immediate action. Just the recognition that he's going to get there. He's got a heart for this and a heart for people. I think that goes a long way. When we can truly trust the person that we're answering to, it gives us a little bit more patience, a little bit more willingness to suffer for a period, knowing that in the long run it's going to come out right.
Yes, definitely. I think, I just kept my faith in God that, what I was doing was right, and that it, eventually we would be in the situation where we need to make the decision. And I knew that Phil would make that decision when confronted with actual data, because I know the man he is.
Well, you've been a huge help today, Beth. I've got several notes down for things that people can learn from what you've discussed, and just appreciate the time you've taken to share that and the heart with it that you've shared. You guys are doing fantastic work at C.H. Hanson. You really are, and you need to know that. You're on the front lines of doing ministry that in the marketplace is so needed today. So thank you for what you're doing there.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity.
Great. You have a great day.